Hello lovelies and welcome to the channel. So today I have something a little different for you. Different but same. Anyway, so today I thought I'd share with you how I put together my junk journals. Now if you've watched any of my videos, you will see that I do a daily junk journal. Well, I have a daily journal, and basically I've had a journal for years, most of us do, and usually I just buy a store-bought journal and just write in it, and that's it. Well, recently I've taken a fascination with junk journals. I love making them, and I had absolutely no use for them all. Like, I was making more than I could use. So I thought, what better way to use them up than to use them as my daily journal? So I have 4. This is my 4th. I'm making my 4th one here. I get 3 months to a journal. I do 3 signatures in each, and I use 1 month per signature. And I tell you what, I'm having so much fun with it. I would definitely continue to do this. It has been a fantastic way to journal. I've got art journal pages, photos, all sorts of random things, and it's much more exciting than just writing in a journal every day. So I thought I'd show you how I put my journals together. So I have just a random book that I get from my local op shop, and I've just gutted it. So I've taken out the pages and ripped them out. Well, actually no, I've cut them out, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to tidy up the spine a bit. So I've got a piece of pattern paper that I've cut to size, and I'm just going to glue that straight in the middle of my spine there with a little overlap on either side that I can also cover in a second. So this is how I'm going to neaten up the inside. Now I always do the inside first, because when I stitch my signatures in, I want this to be all pretty and clean, and obviously I can't do it once I've stitched into it. So this is my first step. I use the Kaiser Craft glaze. I found it to be the best glue for this so far. I haven't tried matte medium yet, gel medium yet. That'll be my next thing to try, because I'm almost running out of this, but I have found that using a silicone brush is much easier than anything else I've used. A foam brush tended to absorb too much of it and wasn't applying it, because it is very hard to spread, but it works the best. So I'm using a silicone brush. Now I've found another piece of pattern paper, and I've cut it to fit on my inside covers, and this is how I'm just going to pretty it up. So I've cut this to size. I tend to eyeball everything. I don't measure, which is terrible of me, but I eyeball it. And then I'm using the glaze again to attach these to the inside cover. I haven't had any problem with this glaze. I have made at least 5 or 6 of these journals now, and I haven't had a problem with any of the pattern paper lifting. So yeah, especially on the bind, on the spine, and that's really important to me. I really like to make sure that the paper adheres properly, but also that I get a really nice crisp spine. It's very important that I have that book-looking spine. You'll see what I mean later on when I get my bone folder out and score inside all the grooves in that. You'll see what I mean by that. So yeah, I do tend to move it and smush it a bit, because when this dries it goes very hard, and if I've left it flat, I find that it makes it very hard to bend afterwards. So I do like to fold and manipulate my book cover just to make sure that everything's good and nice and attached. I have already put my signatures together at this point. That I find that takes the longest part of this entire process. Making my papers, cutting my papers, and then putting my signatures together. So I have not included that in this part of the video. If you would like to see how I choose my papers, how I make my paper, and things like that, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do a video on that portion of putting together my junk journals. But basically, I've already put the signatures together and they're ready to be stitched in. So this is what I mean by making sure I score in all the grooves, so that the glue attaches to the paper properly, and so that I still get that book looking spine. You'll see when I'm finished. So this is my first signature. Now I've already put it together, so I'm just giving you a quick flip of what's in here. I've got lined paper, gel prints, book paper, any sorts of, literally it's called a junk journal for a reason. You can use any kind of junk. A lot of people do, they use junk mail and things. Me, I tend to use scrapbook paper, pattern paper, book paper. Baking paper is one of my favorite things to include. What else? When I gut one of these books, I keep the paper from the inside, and I use it in gel prints or in my junk journals as well. So this is what I'm going to do now. Is I'm going to make what I call a cheat sheet. So this is a tip that I picked up along the way. you get a scrap piece of paper that measures the width of your book, and then you put where your holes will be. Always mark the top, because I found if you don't, for some reason, even if you measure your dots perfectly, if you turn it around and do it the wrong way, it'll be or your dots will be off. So basically I map out where I want my stitching to be, and then I draw it on a piece of paper, and then I line up the piece of paper with my book, and I poke my holes, generally with a pokey tool. This is a horrible example because I'd lost my pokey tool at this point. So I have a needle and I'm literally just stabbing it in with a pen. So yeah, don't do that. But basically, if you go off this guide when you poke the holes in your book and then poke your holes in your signatures, they will all line up perfectly. So first I poke my 3 holes for my 3 signatures in my book spine, and then when I go to stitch in my signature, I will use this guide again, line it up with the middle of my signature and poke my holes in the same places. So that way my holes in my signature and my spine will line up perfectly. Very important to do that part. You may not think it's important, but trust me, it is. Otherwise, you're going to be poking holes and they're not going to line up, and you're going to have uneven pages in your books. So this is that me being very, very lazy and horrible poking holes. Yes, pokey tool is the best thing to use for this. I do put a foam mouse pad underneath because it makes it easier to poke my holes through. So this is what I mean by poking those holes, using your guide in your signatures as well, because that way all your holes are going to line up. So I use wax. See, this is a pokey tool, much easier. I used wax linen and thread. I actually bought it off eBay. I have a spool of it and I have gone through barely any of it. I just cut off a section that I think will be enough, and I can't sew worth a damn. I'm terrible, but this I can do. It's just, from what I understand, it's a simple pamphlet stitch. So basically I go out through the middle hole, through the book spine, and then I'm going to come back through the book spine, through the bottom hole, back up into the middle hole and out again, and then back in through the top hole. Now, it may sound confusing, but it really is simple. Once you do it, it's very simple. You're going through one, in through the other, back through, back out. Now, hopefully you can follow that. I did attempt to draw a little schematic of that diagram, but I think it was more confusing. But if you have any problems, just Google a pamphlet stitch. I'm sure you can find a YouTube video that explains it much better than I can. But I cannot sew, and this I can do, and I'll tell you what, none of my signatures have ever fallen out. So literally, I'll show you again, so hopefully you can follow. But yeah, I skipped my middle signature. This is my last signature. Now, a signature, if you're not sure, is a bunch of pages, basically. So I divide my junk journals into 3 signatures, which I then convert to 3 months. So each signature is 1 month. This being my last journal, it's October, November, December. This being my last signature, it's going to be December. So to make it a little Christmassy, I used Christmas papers, I used Christmas storybooks. This is an envelope, a Christmas envelope that I got in a colouring in book thing. You could colour in your own Christmas cards and matching envelopes. Now, to put an envelope in, I have learnt there is a trick to it. It works much easier if the envelope isn't glued down. So as you can see, this envelope still hasn't been adhered together yet. So it makes it much easier to stitch an envelope into the middle of your signature if it isn't in one piece. So sort of like you've unfolded the envelope. So then what we're going to do is we're going to stitch through the envelope. It's just like stitching another piece in your signature, but it is easier if you if it's open and not glued together, so you're not trying to stitch inside a closed envelope, if that makes sense. I had problems with my my holes for some reason. They weren't lining up perfectly, so I'm just having a quick flick through to see what's happening there, and then I'm going to stitch my signature together. So if we pay close attention, you'll see what I mean. I'm just repiecing my holes because they weren't lining up. When you put your paper together, it is good to line it all up and then hold it together with paper clips or bobby pins, even something that'll stop those pages from moving, so that all your centers are in the same place. So I start with the middle hole and I go through the middle and then out through the spine. Then I'm going to pick a hole. It doesn't matter which way you go. I tend to go down, I think, and I go down to the bottom hole and come back in the spine, in through the paper. then you go back out through the middle again. So through the middle signature and out through the spine again, and then go to the opposite hole that you haven't gone through yet and come back in through the spine, in through the paper that way. And then literally you just tie a knot in the middle and you're done. It's a very simple stitch. If I can do it, you can, trust me. And it's very sturdy. I've not had a problem with it yet. So it's a very sturdy stitch, very simple. I do tend to use a bigger needle because I use the wax linen thread. I have done this with cotton in the past, just good old plain cotton. You could use pretty much anything, baker's twine, anything you wanted. You just need to be able to have a needle big enough to pull your thread through. So yeah, do pull it nice and tight. I do tend to pull through each hole I go through because it is wax linen thread. You've got to give it a nice tug and make sure it's nice and tight. The tighter you pull it, the tighter your signature is going to be in your book. It did take me a little bit to get this right. Generally, it's not a hard stitch at all, but just making sure it's nice and tight and that I've done it straight pretty much. But the beauty of a junk journal is it's a junk journal. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's whatever you want it to be. So now I'm going to glue together my envelope, and as you can see, once I've glued the flaps and everything down, it's an envelope stitched into my junk journal, so it looks great. So just flipping through that last signature for you, and that's my Christmas signature, we're going to call that. And yeah, as you can see, I've used book pages, note pages, all sorts of things. Literally, I have a great stash of things that I use. I've used old gel prints, paper, I do watercolor and things. A lot of people tea dye their paper, tea or coffee dye. Because I like to use bright colours, instead of tea dyeing and coffee dyeing, what I do is I will watercolour my pages. I will use mist on them, and that's how I colour my pages for my journal. So now I'm going to finish off the book, and I'm going to cover my spine on the outside. Now, a lot of people leave these as they are, or cover their spine and then do their stitches through it anyway. Some people like to see the stitches. Recently, I found that covering them, I can cover them and it looks just as good, so that's what I do. So I'm just going to cut another piece of paper that, these are literally my offcuts from the scrapbook paper I've used on the inside of the journal. So I'm just going to cut that down to size. This one I do measure, because I don't like to fold it over. I just like to cut it so it fits perfectly, and then I can just glue it straight over the top. So I've cut it down to size, and I'm going to use that same glue, cover that piece of paper, and then I'm going to press it down into my spine, and then I'm going to use my bone folder and make sure I score inside all those grooves so that this attaches really well, so that there's no gaps underneath or air bubbles or anything. So I'm going to press it down nice and hard, and then I'm going to get my scorer, and I'm just going to run that over it to make sure that, yeah, it's down nice and hard. And then my favourite part is to get my bone folder and put it right in between that groove. If you look on the spine of a book, there are grooves in the spine. I like to make sure I can keep those even though I've covered it, because to me it looks like more like a book that way, and doesn't give you that hard square edge. So I really that's my favourite part. I really do like to make sure I keep that. So I get my bone folder in there nice and hard, and then yeah, that's my journal done. So hopefully this wasn't too confusing for you. I just thought it would be nice to share with you how I make my own junk journals. And yeah, I use them for all sorts of random things. I have one for my boys, just to put random photos in. I use it as my daily journal. You'll see many videos on the channel about that too. So yeah, lots of great ideas of what you can use these for. So once you start making them, it's very addictive. You can't stop. So hopefully I've shared that with you. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll be back soon with more. Bye for now.